FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
What is the danger of these familial searches? They really raise the specter of notions of genetic surveillance and habitual criminality that date back to Lombroso and to the eugenics movement. The idea that people are more likely to offend in the future, not because of what they've done, but because of who they are, that certain people are predisposed to violence and therefore should be under especially acute surveillance. This is not a theoretical concern in America. It's been estimated that there's evidence of racially disproportionate conviction rates, and that by doing familial testing in the American DNA databases, 17% of African Americans would be findable through the system, as compared to only 4% of the Caucasian population. This is why, when the idea of familial searches is introduced in America, as is now being debated, I think there'll be a passionate debate not only about privacy, but about equality, and the idea that certain segments of the population will be subject to genetic surveillance because of their relatives. Now, what legal principles, constitutional principles, does the ideal of familial searching and genetic surveillance violate? I want to identify a bunch of them, and speaking not in a technical legal term, but just the principles of justice, of a liberal state shared by America and Britain that are implicated by these technologies. The first is the idea that there should not be searches without individualized suspicion for general law enforcement purposes, that the government should have to have a cause to suspect an individual of wrongdoing before it can do a genetic search. I was interested to hear from Ross about the subpoena to the abortion provider. In America, there was a similar subpoena to a hospital that had been treating pregnant mothers and were drug users. And the claim was if there was evidence of drugs in their fetuses, they might be prosecuted for negligent conduct. The Supreme Court refused this search because it held that the purpose of convicting the mothers was not relevant to the reason that they were admitted to the hospital, and you were not allowed to have general searches for broad law enforcement purposes. But these familial searches violate that principle, and if upheld, would be the first time that the Supreme Court has approved of suspicionless searches designed to produce ordinary evidence of criminal wrongdoing for use by the police. The second principle that's violated is deep in our shared legal history, and it really has to do with the corruption of blood. This very basic idea that we should not hold the children accountable for the sins of the fathers. My mother told me when I was young, something I remember very deeply, that you should be responsible not for you should be responsible only for what you do, not for who you are. That basically there should be a notion of wrongdoing, but not wrong being. And that principle is violated by the idea of genetic surveillance. The American Constitution, drawing on British history, prohibits bills of attainder that banish you from civilized society because of what your parents have done. Your father is a traitor, you cannot be made a stranger to the law. But when individual segments of the population are subject to permanent genetic scrutiny because of their blood, literally, that idea of the ability to recreate yourself is threatened. The third principle that's violated is the principle essential to privacy law. Data convicted for one purpose shouldn't be broadly disclosed for another purpose. So the general justification for these DNA databases, in America in particular, was the idea that convicts have a lower expectation of privacy, and to prevent recidivism, they can be subject to greater scrutiny. But once their parents, their families are under permanent surveillance, for reasons that have nothing to do with their own wrongdoing, that principle is violated in a profound way. And the third idea, and the final idea, is this ideal of equality, and the idea that the state should not classify citizens, should not put them in different categories based on their predicted wrongdoing, and the effort to predict future behavior based on genetic predisposition violates basic principles of equality.